Next. I can't even remember my own advice. So you've seen a whole bunch of videos of me and Sarah gardening, eating some lovely food, meeting some nice people, and doing generally decent woofing experiences. That's not to say that we didn't encounter some very strange, weird and uncomfortable situations as well whilst woofing. And we definitely had our fair share of horror stories when woofing goes terribly, terribly wrong. And I'd like to share some of those stories with you right now. Some of them I experienced, some of them Sarah experienced, and some of them other people had told us about whilst we were woofing and before we were woofing, and yet we still decided to go because we thought it would be great. I think it makes sense for me to be honest about it. I'm not being sponsored by WWOOF, and also the only way that you can make a good decision whether it's going to be for you, whether this form of budget travel would work for you, whether you'd even be interested in it, and how you can kind of prepare for it, is if I be really honest about the different stuff we've heard, the different stuff we actually encountered as well, not to just paint it rosy red that everything was great. Most of it was, to be honest, most of it was fantastic, but then there were just a few occasions that we were like, oh god, what have we got ourselves into? WWOOFing is a system based on trust. The website says so itself, but with that comes an implied code of conduct and certain rules and guidelines that should be adhered to, and then everything will be fine and dandy. Sarah and I had heard of some tales of woe when this wasn't the case. Not enough food. Whilst we were at Malcolm's at Glenbenue, he told us some horror story of a guy who had woofed with him. The previous woofing placement that he had come from was an absolute disaster. The website specifies that you can choose to either provide cooked meals for your woofing volunteers, or you can provide them with the raw materials and the appliances so that they can cook for themselves. But the thing is, you need to give them food, and enough of it. This poor guy who'd come from all the way from Japan to go to Ireland was expected to stay for 2 weeks at this other farm, not Malcolm's, with a bag of dry pasta. They literally apparently handed him a bag of dry pasta, and that was supposed to be his breakfast, lunch and dinner without any sauce or anything, and he was supposed to live on that for 2 weeks. That is not acceptable, and that's an extreme circumstance. Obviously every single farm that Sarah and I went to, and myself at Sally's before without Sarah, every farm that we went to, the food was amazing. We had loads of it. It was really great. It's a good idea to check out the food situation before you click apply. Number 2, randy farmers. This one I heard the first week of woofing. I was already out there and woofing, and it was actually from Sally, my first woof host. She told me that she'd rescued another woofer who basically, she'd just come from this other farm where there was a young guy by himself, he owned a farm, and they got on like a house on fire straight away. There was really good chemistry, and so eventually they did get physical. But apparently, literally the day after they'd slept together, he completely ignored her and treated her just like any other volunteer and kind of pretended like nothing had happened. Obviously, she got really confused and frustrated, and so wanted to leave because you don't want to be in an uncomfortable situation like that. And so she managed to get to Sally's instead, who obviously kept it in her pants and was very lovely. Number 3, lazy woof hosts that treat you like a slave. This one actually came from Sarah. I actually heard about woofing through Sarah. She'd done a good couple of weeks, I think, in Canada in various different farms, and most of the time she had an absolutely amazing experience, which is what made me want to do it. However, she did have one horror story where the people who owned the farm were ridiculously lazy, and they'd lay in bed all day whilst their volunteers were supposed to run their farm basically, which included trying to save the life of a baby goat who'd been born prematurely, who was freezing to death outside. All of these poor, inexperienced volunteers were trying to save the life of a goat whilst they laid in bed. It's completely unacceptable. Like, you're there to volunteer and help, definitely, but it's expected that they pitch in as well, and supervise. Obviously, the whole idea is that you learn from them about organic farming. You're not going to learn anything when your host's in bed while you're trying to rear a baby goat. Despite hearing all of these horror stories, and despite coming up against a few awkward situations of our own, like the freezing sleeping conditions at Glenbanu or the horse hoarder next door to Dee Dee's farm, that was weird, I still honestly believe that woofing is a genius system that gets you from A to B, that you can learn all about, animals and farming and ways to be healthier in yourself, as well as do some awesome touristy things and make some new friends at the same time. That is, if the guidelines and rules are adhered to by both parties. Woofing involves individual people around the world, so there's no surefire way to predict what kind of property, what kind of host experience you're actually going to have. But that being said, there are some ways that you can minimise ending up in an unhappy situation. Number 1, read the profile. Do not just judge their profile picture. It might look like a beautiful house, but then if they mention that actually you'll be working 8 hours a day and get 1 meal, and you'll have to sleep in the barn with horses, that's not a real thing. They wouldn't be allowed to do that. But as an example, you need to make sure what kind of situation you're getting in before you get on a flight out to another country. Things like, what are the living conditions like? Will I have to cook my own food? Will there be other volunteers there, or will I be on my own? How far away is it from the shops and other services? What kind of work I'll be doing? All of these kind of questions you'll need to know. If they're not on the Woof host's profile page, then just shoot them an email. Number 2, read the comments. Underneath each Woof host's profile, there should be comments and reviews from people who have woofed with them before. If there's a new one, then there might not be any comments, and you can just sort of judge it yourself and take a risk, and then you can be the first person to review them. But if it's your first time woofing, I'd suggest trying to look for people who have had woofers in the past, so they know how it works basically. If they say, this person was really mean, they treated me like a slave, don't go there. Why would you go there? If they say, oh, it was absolutely wonderful, but me and the woof host kind of had a bit of a different opinion in certain stuff and we butted heads occasionally, again, that might be something you can deal with. You might get on perfectly with the woof host, you never know. One example of this is Dee Dee's farm. We almost avoided Dee Dee's farm, and it turned out to be one of the best woof hosts that we ever had. Some comments on there were things like, oh, she can turn into a bit of a drill sergeant and she's a bit too direct. Well, we found her fantastic, so whether she magically changed since those woof hosts had their stay there, or whether it was just that certain people, and definitely certain cultures, have a different kind of experience to like British humour or American instruction or something. So different people have conversations in a different way and we communicate in a different way. So you're going to understand that that's going to be a little bit different, and sometimes you might butt heads with the woof host depending on that. But I think you find mostly if both you and the woof host go in with an open mind and no real clear expectations or assumptions of each other, then you're going to have a wonderful experience. Don't forget, language barriers and things like that can play a key part, so when you're looking to woof host in a different country, make sure that they're going to speak your language, otherwise that's going to be really awkward. Lastly, check out the forums and chat rooms where you can talk to people who have been there and done that. What better source to trust than somebody who's already been to the host place that you're looking to go to, and they can tell you what to expect Again, bearing in mind different opinions, some people might find something horrible that you would absolutely love, and vice versa. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea exactly the same around the world. Some people don't drink tea. But also trust some people's word. If they say, do not go here in all caps, and then with like a little death emoji, don't go there. Seriously, it's bad news. Well, that was just a little bit of advice on how to avoid becoming another WWOOF horror story. As we get through to more of the episodes, you'll see some of the interesting stuff that Sarah and I got up to in bad situations that we managed to sort of overcome. And yeah, hopefully I'll be having a few more episodes coming out soon as well. I'm sorry, I know I've missed some. I've been busy doing stuff, planning the new trip, which I will announce soon, I promise. I know I've been saying that for like ages, but I wanted to get everything sorted and like finalised before I announce to you where it is I'm going. But I can say that I am going to a very nice location for 5 weeks very soon. Well, thanks for liking and commenting, and if you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more helpful travel budget tips. See you in the world. Bye!